There you go.
Great, thank you, everyone. So hello, good morning. My name's Farhana Chowdhury. I'm a third year PhD student at Newcastle University, and my project focused on using models of human behaviour change for animal welfare. And today I'll be presenting to you the second study of my PhD, which looked at exploring the barriers to using low stress mouse handling methods. So the housing and handling of animals can impact its welfare, and there's many studies which have found that the welfare of animals can impact the quality of scientific data produced for studies. However, lab animals rely on their human handlers to make changes to better their welfare. So to make any improvements, it's the human handlers that we need to focus on. Lab environments are quite complex, so the animals encounter many different technicians and researchers and managers on a day-to-day basis. So if we want to make any consistent or meaningful changes, they're the people that we need to focus on. So a lot of my project focused on identifying their needs and understanding their experiences so that an environment where welfare is prioritized can be made. So this PhD focuses on the handling of mice as a case study. So traditionally, mice have been handled by tail capture. I know that tail capture has many different terms like tail handling, but for the purpose of this study, when I say tail capture, I mean holding the mouse by the base of its tail and then lifting. There is a lot of evidence that tail capture can be very harmful to the mouse. So this project focuses on increasing the use of tunnel handling. So tunnel handling is a method for capturing the mouse by encouraging it to go into the tunnel and then lifting the tunnel, and then the mouse can be restrained as normal. So there are many benefits to tunnel handling. So it's known as a low stress method. Research has found, for example, that it reduces anxiety and depression and it reduces chronic stress. It can also improve research outcomes by reducing data variability. So the stress that comes from handling doesn't need to be considered as a variable. In addition, when mice are handled with a tunnel, they display increased exploration and better performance than standard behavioural tests. But despite all of this evidence, it's still not fully adopted in the UK. A study by Henderson et al. Found that not many people used it back in 2020. So I decided to run a survey to find out why people don't use low stress handling all of the time. I also wanted to examine the participants' understanding of their workplace guidelines, because this may also affect how people choose to handle, and it gives us a bit more of a contextual understanding of how people interpret their workplace guidelines. So I also asked what methods people use, in what situations, and why. So the survey involved 7 universities in the UK and I had 141 responses. So I reached out to these universities directly and gave them individual links to share the survey so that I could compare and contrast between universities. I also asked the universities to send me their workplace guidelines if they did have any that related to mouse handling so I could look at that in depth. I designed the survey using the theoretical domains framework, which is a validated tool that's designed to identify implementation problems. Using approaches from the health intervention sciences really kept the project quite structured, and I like it as a tool. I had a 4-week data collection period. This was back in 2022, so a little while ago. Using the survey meant that I could reach people from different facilities in a shorter period of time and get a more broader perspective of handling in the UK. So I was really happy to find that most participants reported using low stress methods the majority of the time. So 28% of the sample used it always, 51 used it most of the time, and only 8% mostly used tail capture. So I wanted to find out why. 20% of our sample reported using a method that they know they shouldn't, which is tail capture. This was a qualitative question, so the participants respond with free text, and I analysed that using thematic analysis. So the first theme was time pressure and workload. So this refers to any comments where people feel like they need to act quickly due to high workloads, or they feel that tail capture would be quicker in these situations. Most participants report using difficulty with low stress handling at some point, getting frustrated, and then resorting to tail capture. And the next theme is linked to this. So some participants worried that their repeated attempts to use low stress methods would actually cause more stress for the mouse than using a quick tail capture. So out of concern for its welfare, they suggested that they could use a quick tail capture and that would be less stress for the mouse, but that would suggest to me a lack of effective training. So we asked people why they use tail capture, again, using qualitative questions, and these were the most common themes. So problematic mouse behavior. So this included comments about jumpy mice, aggressive mice, or mice who attempt to escape. And that's linked to the next theme, which is risk avoidance. So participants report using tail capture preemptively to avoid escapes or mouse injuries. And the final theme refers to when technicians or researchers can't use it for practical reasons. So if the mouse has some equipment on, it can't actually physically go in the tunnel. And here's a little quote from a researcher. So in these situations, chasing the mouse around the cage to engage in low stress methods may result in more stress for the mice. Rare tail capture does not negate the positive effects of low stress handling. So that final sentence, I don't think there actually is any evidence to suggest this. If anyone knows anything, then please do send it my way. I'd be really interested to find out a bit more. So why do people use tunnel handling? So or any low stress methods? The answers to this were lovely. Most participants report using it because they are motivated by welfare and want to do what's best for the mice. The second theme refers to the human experience. So they feel more bonded to the animal, or that they are less risk of being bitten, so therefore they're less stressed themselves. And that quote from the technician, because this is the least stressful method for the mice, and in my experience, less stressful for the human too. And that emphasizes both the human side and the mouse side. And some people report using it because they simply have to, or because they're strongly encouraged to by their workplace guidelines. So the following steps, based on the findings of the survey and an additional interview study that I did, I developed a video intervention. I found that a lot of people report using tail capture in the event of a mouse escaping, or because they feel that the mouse is at risk of escaping, and then they think, okay, I'll use tail capture to prevent anything bad happening. So with the help from staff in the animal facility at Newcastle University, I developed a training video, and that included a demonstration of how to recapture mice using tunnel handling in 4 different escape scenarios. So that was if the mouse escaped on the floor under any equipment, if they escaped on a hood or onto a person. And then I delivered that intervention to pilot it for acceptability and feasibility. And a lot of that was developed with stakeholder engagement, because I feel it's really important to include the target audience in any behaviour change project to make it sure it's relevant and it speaks to the people who it's targeted towards. I'm also planning some evaluation in a few months to see if the intervention works and if people do feel like they can use tunnel handling for any escapes now. And I also want to do a bit of more in-depth understanding into the workplace guidelines. So I noticed that within institutions, there is a lot of variability in how people interpret them. I found that some people interpret their actual mouse handling training as workplace guidelines, which is very interesting. So that bit of contextual understanding to me is very, it's something I'd like to look a bit more into. So until then, I'd like to make some recommendations to researchers or technicians. First of all, if you don't already adopt low stress handling fully, I'd like you to take some time to consider your own barriers. It may be that you find yourself chasing the mouse with the tunnel and your technique isn't quite working for you and you get frustrated. That is something that can be fixed, which leads me to my next recommendation, which is don't be afraid to ask for help. I know the training team at Newcastle are really excellent at giving extra support to anyone who needs it, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere. So yeah, ask for help if you need it. Have a look at the NC3R's mouse handling resources. So they've got a mouse handling training course online, which is publicly available, and it's really good. It's got some videos and quizzes. And keep an eye out for my video. It might be coming out publicly available in the next few months. So thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So as usual, if anybody's got any questions, go ahead and pop them in the talk. So I've got one to kick things off. I mean, obviously with these things, as you said, there's definitely some great ideas there for moving things forward. What do you think the best way to achieve impact with this kind of work would be?
For
Either
me,
for others, moving, yeah.
Well, for me, I spent, because my background psychology, I've never set foot in a lab before this project. So I spent a good 6 months of my PhD shadowing people, having a lot of conversations and speaking to a lot of different groups to really fully understand the barriers before I even designed my survey.
Mhm.
I think for maximum impact, you need to talk to the people who the intervention or anything is based for. Um, I just saw the comment, yes, a social scientist. Yeah, I think speaking to people is really important. And some of the things I picked up on is the divide between technicians and researchers. It, I saw in not just at Newcastle, but elsewhere, there's a very much an us versus them narrative that's going on. And therefore, my intervention is very tailored towards a certain group rather than thinking that one size will fit all, because it's just certainly not the case.
Yeah, no, that it's an interesting point. I mean, I think that obviously there's two things that I guess that come out of this. One is obviously what the best practices are, but then the second is how to implement them and then
Yeah.
how to get that message out to people, which is always the tricky thing. So, I mean,
Mhm.
what do you think the best channels are? Because obviously you say speaking to people, and I completely agree. But what do you think the best channels for that are? Do you think that's through meetings or through setting up, things like the NC3Rs have, like where they have guidelines and so on? I mean, what do you
Yeah.
envisage being this way forward?
So from speaking to people, I've realized that a lot of the researchers, a, a way to for them to change is they're very motivated by evidence. So that's a channel that I would go through if I want to reach researchers, is going through evidence, having data. And for technicians, it's I noticed that a lot of it's about understanding their role and their workplace and how they get information. And I found that a lot of technicians are influenced by, if they see another technician implementing a refinement, they're like, okay, well, that technician knows the pressures of my role, and if it works for them, it might work for me too. Um, so I would maybe, yeah, my video, I'm hoping maybe the NC3Rs might be interested in it, and that's a quite a hub for best practice. So I'd like to do that and reach technicians that way.
Excellent. So I don't see any other questions on the chat, as far as I can see. But if anyone has any questions, pop them in. I'm sure Farhana will be here for a little while longer if she wants to answer some questions if any pop up.